Hey friends, it's Corey from Hey Let's Make Stuff. Today's video is a Cricut tutorial, but more specifically, it is a Cricut tutorial for people who love books. Something you might not know about me is that I am a huge reader and I love books. So back before this was a craft blog, this was actually a book review blog. You won't find any of those book reviews on my blog anymore because I've really shifted to crafts, but I love to read. Every year I usually read more than 100 books, and I actually have a master's degree in publishing. For most of my life, I thought I would be working in books. Life took a little bit of a different turn and I went into marketing, and then I started this craft blog, but I am still a huge reader. So today I'm combining that love of books with my love of crafts, and we are doing a project called Sprayed Book Edges. You can see my examples here. So this top book, which we're going to do today, has no sprayed edges, but the four below it, I've used my Cricut to basically create a stencil and then used spray paint to color the book edges to match the actual books. If you're also a reader, you may have seen this trend on TikTok or Instagram. A lot of times it's within the fantasy novels, but you can do this with any book that you have. For today's tutorial, I am using Sarah J. Maas's ACOTAR series, so A Court of Thorns and Roses. If you're familiar, it's a fantasy series, and I happen to have all of the books in hardback. You can do this with paperback. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I thought this would be a really great series, plus it's one that a lot of people have read. I specifically designed a set of SVGs to use with this particular set of books, so this is very specific, but if you would like to get the SVGs to make the stencils for this particular series of books, I have those in my craft library. To access my craft library, you can go to heyletsmakestuff.com/library, and there you can request the password. Then go back to that same page to access the library. This project is Cricut 481, so C481, and there's two ways to find it in the library. The first is to click that Cricut SVG button. That will take you further down on the page where you can find file C481. Even easier, if you're on your computer, you can use the search function. Control F if you're on a PC, Command F if you're on a Mac, and just search for C481 and it'll take you right to the file. There you will find three links. The first link is the download. So if you click that link, it will download a zip to your hard drive. The second link is a link to the blog post for this video, and the third link is this video. This project requires quite a few supplies, so let's get into those. Of course, you're going to need the book that you're going to decorate, so I've got mine here. You're also going to need some basic Cricut supplies. So I have my Cricut Maker over here. You can use any Cricut that you'd like. I also have a green cutting mat, as well as some removable vinyl. I have some transfer tape, a weeding hook, and a scraper. And then you're going to need some supplies to prep your book, and I've done this a few ways and I have found that these work the best. So you're going to need some painter's tape. You're going to need like 2 pieces of wood. So you can see here that I've sprayed these several times. Mine aren't the same size. These are just offcuts of wood I had in the garage, but you're going to need something like this. You're going to need some maybe brown wrapping paper. You can use any kind of paper, but basically we're covering the cover so we don't spray paint it. This is from like an Amazon package, and I find it works pretty well. You could use like a brown paper bag if you don't have something like this. But overall, you're going to need something basically to protect the cover of your book while we spray the edges. Then you're going to need some clamps. You can use C-clamps. I actually have these sort of ratcheting clamps, which I really like. They have a little release here. I never covered them when I was spray painting, so they did get some paint on them. If you want to kind of protect your clamps, you can wrap them in plastic or something like that, but I didn't find that necessary. And then you're going to need some spray paint. So you can use any color paint you'd like. I went ahead and matched them to the covers of my books, but you can use whatever you'd like. My favorite spray paint is Montana Gold. You can get it at Blick Art Supplies. I will go ahead and link that down below. It comes in so many colors, so you can always find a spray paint that's going to match the book that you want to do. You definitely want to get a matte or satin finish spray paint no matter what brand you use. A glossy spray paint, I don't think the pages would separate quite as easily. It creates more of that sort of enamel-y-like finish, and you definitely don't want that. You want something that's a little bit easier to break apart, and I think a matte or satin will work so much better than a gloss. A couple other notes about these materials. Like I said, you're going to want removable vinyl. I tried permanent first because I thought it would work, and it technically did work, but it was a little bit hard to remove from those book edges, much harder than I thought it would be. The rest I did with Oracal 631, which is removable. I did that and it worked a lot better than that permanent. I did try masking tape instead of painter's tape, but it did pull up one of the insides of my covers and I was really disappointed. So definitely use some painter's tape instead of masking tape. And when it comes to the books, I am using the hard covers. I think they look the best. However, you can do this with paperbacks if that's what you have. All right, I set my Cricut stuff over to the side. We'll get to that in a minute, and we're gonna start by prepping our book. So to start, you're gonna remove that dust jacket and you're gonna set it aside because you are gonna want to use it in the future. I don't know if you did this when you were a kid, when you had to wrap your textbooks. It's similar. You do want to make sure that you are covering the entire cover because you don't want any of the cover to get paint on it. This is the 5th book I've wrapped. This is definitely something I have not perfected yet, but basically you just want to make sure that you're not going to get any paint on the cover. So I did this last time and it worked pretty well. So I'm going to fold this bottom up here, just like this. It's been a long time since I've wrapped a textbook. And then at the top, I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to go like this. So I've got the bottom edge lined up here. And then I'm going to fold this top down as well. So there, that should work just like that. And then I'm going to fold this over and tape it inside my book. So I'm going to grab some of my painter's tape here. You may want to have a few pieces ready to go. So I'm going to pull off a little tape here, just like that. This looks a little long, so I am going to trim off some of this here. And then I'm going to do the same on this back cover, just like this. I apologize if there's a little noise in the background. There's a very loud truck out there right now. But basically, the next step is you want to cover up these top and bottom edges, and I'm going to do that with painter's tape. The spine tends to be the hardest part of the book. You want to make sure that you're covering up both the actual cover as well as any fabric binding. So mine has this little black stripe of fabric binding. You want to make sure you cover that up because you don't want to get paint in the binding. So basically I kind of open it up and I set this in here just like this. And I kind of fold the book around. And then I fold my tape over. Again, it does not need to be pretty, it just needs to cover everything. So that's pretty good. I don't know if you can see here, I've got the tiniest piece of my book cover showing, so I'm just gonna put another piece of tape right over that. So when I close the book here, I don't have anything but pages showing. So you wanna do that on the top, and then I'm going to do it again on the bottom. All right, so I have my whole book wrapped. You wanna make sure that everything is really tight, that you have none of that cover showing. You don't want the tape covering up any of the pages either. So just go through and like really tuck it in, especially in that spine. Just making sure that it's just the pages that are visible. Another thing you'll want to do is label the front and back of your book if you're using a stencil that goes a specific way. Because the book is covered, it could go this way, like we don't know which way it wants to go. So I'm gonna open it up. This is the top of my book. So I'm gonna go, this is the front of my book, and this is the back of my book. And I'm gonna write it on both sides here so I can see no matter where I put those clamps. Now we're going to clamp our book. So I've seen some other creators using cardboard, but I highly recommend wood instead. So I'm gonna go to the overhead view here. And you can see that if I am using cardboard, which is much more flexible, and I clamp the edges here, it sort of bows in the middle. It doesn't get really tight in the middle. But if I'm using wood, it basically clamps the entire thing. So I've found that the wood works a lot better. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my wood on either side here. And this is just going to be kind of messy because it's just a little difficult to do. And again, I have these ratcheting clamps, but you can use C clamps. So I'm gonna kind of get it as tight as I can here. And I'm gonna get the other one as tight as I can on this side. Just like that. And then I kind of spin them to the side a little bit. So they're kind of on the corners. That way, when you're spraying, you can spray the top and the sides without getting the clamps too much in the way. So you can see here that they're still pretty loose. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use my desk to tighten them up. If you have some sort of superhuman grip strength, you can use that. I don't. So actually, I have found that if I stand up, so I'm going to do that really fast, and I lean on my clamp here, I can get it to click another couple pieces here, get the ratchet going, and then it's much more solid. So let's do it on the other side here. And then once I have that, the whole thing is much more solid. And then in the overhead view here, you can see that I'm not getting that bowing in the center that I would if I was just using cardboard as sort of my frame. Now that you have it clamped, you actually have a bunch of options. So for me, I'm using my Cricut to create a stencil, but you could just spray them a solid color using spray paint. You could also grab your airbrushing pen and do gradients and other designs. I don't have an airbrushing pen, but I have seen some really cool ones over on TikTok. So if you want to create that sort of look, you totally can with an airbrushing pen. And if you have fine art painting skills, then you can actually hand paint the edges of your books. I've seen some really beautiful ones, totally outside my wheelhouse. There is a reason that I use crafting machines. designs, but if you are a painter, you can lightly go through with your acrylic paints and actually paint the edges of your book by hand. All right, I've set my prepared book aside and we're gonna do the Cricut portion of this project now. Like I said, you can get this ACOTAR series of stencils for me in my craft library. There are also other series that people have made stencils for. You can get those on places like Etsy or other people's shops. So if you're looking for a different series, you might be able to find it. Let's pop into Cricut Design Space and set up our file. All right, here I am in Cricut Design Space. I've uploaded the file for this project. Obviously, I've already made these other four, so I'm going to hide the ones I don't want to make this time and leave just the roses. This is already sized to fit my book, so I'm going to go ahead and click Make. I'm going to choose On Matte, and then I'm going to actually cut it at the top, so I'm going to rotate it here and move it to the top. Click Continue. I'm going to choose Removable Matte Vinyl, and now I can prepare my mat to cut. Like I said, I'm using this Oracal 631. It works really well. This is a really old piece of material, so I'm kind of working through some of my older vinyl because it does sort of expire after a while. Because my mat is not super sticky, I am going to use my brayer to get it to stick down really well. And because the file itself has some really small pieces, I made sure to put a new blade into my machine. All right, I'm not gonna lie, I actually had a hard time cutting that Oracal 631 with this particular image, even though I cut it just fine before with the exact same material. So I picked a different piece of removable vinyl and it worked just fine. So again, professionals, we're just like you, things don't always go our way. So I have my image cut out here. So you've got a couple options here for weeding. The first is to remove the actual flowers, and then your flowers will be the thing that is colored on your book edges. Or you can remove the outside and your flowers will actually be the things that are white while the color is all around. So I'm gonna remove around the edge of my flowers because I want the flowers themselves to be white. Next, we're gonna add that piece of transfer tape right on top here, just like that. I'm gonna grab my scraper and scrape it down here, just like that. And then I'm gonna peel this all up off my mat, just like that. Then we're gonna grab those scissors again, and we're basically going to trim right at the edge. You could use a rotary cutter as well. I'm just gonna use my scissors here and cut all the way down. So now we have our stencil with transfer tape. I am gonna flip it over here and I'm gonna peel back the carrier sheet so our vinyl should remain just on our stencil. The next step is to apply the stencil to the book. And this is why I had you write front and back. So I've got my front here, you can see in the overhead view, front, and then if I flip this whole thing over, I've got it on the back as well. And that's because these roses, I want them to be facing up. I don't want them to be like upside down. So if this is the front, that makes this over here the top. So I'm gonna flip it around here just so I can do this. And honestly, this is easier with two people, but we're gonna go ahead and give it a shot here. And this should nestle in pretty well. Depending on how tightly you have your book clamped, you may have a little overlap on the edges, and that's totally fine. You'll want to make sure you scrape it properly, but overall it should fit nicely in there, just like this. Then grab that scraper, and we're gonna scrape our stencil onto our book edges here. You wanna make sure to get like the edges here, especially if you have a little bit of overlap. It really depends on how tightly you have your book clamped. Just like this. You can get in there with your hands too. Just like that. Then we can peel back the transfer tape and our stencil should stick to the edges. Again, you wanna go slow, making sure that you don't lose any pieces. Just like this. The clamps don't make it super easy, but there we go, just like that. Then I like to go in with my thumb and just make sure everything is pressed down really good one more time, because you don't want any paint seeping under the edges of your stencil. So I kind of just get in there, make sure everything is pressed down really well. All right, now we are going on a field trip because I do not like to spray paint things inside my office. So we are outside my office. You can see that I actually live in the forest over here. This is my house. It doesn't look anything like it does inside my office, does it? So I'm gonna go ahead and set up my camera so that you can see me spray painting the edges here in a box that I've set up on my deck. I also thought I would introduce you to my dog. This is Gus. He's very interested in what's going on right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and set my phone over here so you can see what I'm doing. And you can see that I have it sort of sitting up, and I have my spray paint here. And what I'm going to do is a bunch of light coats, because we're going to do 2 coats of this. So make sure you shake your spray paint really well. And then we're going to do light coats on the top, bottom, and side of the book here. All right, I did that first coat, so I'm gonna go ahead and let it dry for about 30 minutes, and then I'm gonna do a second coat. After that, I'm gonna let it dry for 6 hours, and I'm gonna come back and finish this video later this afternoon. All right, it has been a couple of hours. I would honestly normally give it 6, but I gotta finish filming this video today, so I think it's been about 4 hours, but I think it's probably dry enough that it's not gonna be a problem. I did have one minor mishap while I was spray painting, that one of my clamps, I hit it and it sprung loose, and it makes me a little nervous that I may have gotten some paint on the pages. I got it clamped back really quickly, but I guess we're gonna have to see how it goes. So in the overhead here, you can see that I've covered the whole thing with paint, and I'm gonna release my clamps here, just like that, just like that. And then I can remove my little boards here and set those to the side. And now it's time to grab that weeding hook, and we can weed off basically all of our rose pieces. So I'll start down here at this end. You wanna be really careful not to dent the pages, but you can see here as I peel up all of these little pieces, just how nicely that vinyl blocked the paint from getting onto the book. All right, that turned out really well. So now all that's left to do is take off our cover here and add the dust jacket. Make sure you're peeling up the tape really carefully. Even the painter's tape can pull up the inside of the cover paper here, and you don't want that to happen. And it looks perfect. I love how this turned out. I was a little afraid I might have some paint bleed because of how I lost my clamp, but I don't. Overall, I am just so thrilled with how this turned out. So this is definitely one of those projects that takes a little bit more time, and it's really niche, but I am so excited that I was able to share it with you today. I am going to actually place these on my shelf with the spines out, because I know exactly what each of these books is now that I have painted them myself, and I think that they're just gonna look really cool on my shelf. You do wanna wait at least 24 hours between really fanning the pages of the book. That will give the paint time to cure and set, and that way you're not gonna end up with a lot of flaking paint when you go to actually open the book and read it. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to spray your book edges using your Cricut and spray paint. If you have any questions about the process, I would be happy to answer those down in the comments. Follow my channel for more Cricut, sublimation, and laser content. I'll see you next time.